So I think people thought I was joking when I said, hey, that's just a line from the Zionist Playbook. But there's actually a Zionist Playbook. It was published in 2009 to help people defend the atrocities of Israel. And if you don't believe me, you could just type in that title, The Israel Project, and you could download the 116-page document. It even has a table of contents, rules for effective communication, glossary of words that work, how to talk about Palestine's self-government and prosperity, isolating Iran-backed Hamas as an obstacle to peace, Israel's right to self-defense and defensible borders. Do you ever wonder why everyone sounds the same when they're talking about Israel? There's no second opinion. It's because it's literally written out for them. This is 18 chapters. So here, this is like chapter 1, the 25 rules for effective communication. And the first point is, it doesn't matter if you know, you need to show the other side you care. So they're telling people to fake caring. So persuadables won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Show empathy for both sides. So this is like a tactic that they tell people to do. It's weird that they have to write it out. So this was nice too. Things not to say. We are prepared to allow them to build. Don't use that. Don't use that. We allow them to build. Even though that's what they're doing, they're saying don't use it. Don't use it. Try this one. Achieving peaceful relations requires the leadership, political, business, and military of both sides. And so we asked the Palestinians, stop using that language of incitement. Stop using the language of violence. And, they're trying to turn it back on the Palestinians. But this is a script. So when I say this is a Zionist line or from the playbook, because it literally is from the playbook. And this is what every probably reporter or anchor on TV has in front of them. Every congressman is probably giving this when they, get sworn in. Here's your copy of the Israel's Zionist playbook. So this is amazing that this isn't exposed yet. But how can the current Palestinian leadership honestly say it will pursue peace when previous leaders rejected an offer? You always hear that. What about the offers that were rejected? It came from here. This is still chapter 1, I think, page whatever. But how do I make peace with a government who wants me dead? Why are they phrasing it like that? You ever wonder why they phrase it like that? Because they're told to phrase it like that. I heard Piers Morgan use one of these in his interview with Sinek, and he said that's a weird way to phrase the question. It's an unfair way to phrase the question, and this is why. Because he got it from the playbook. It's right here. These are the questions you're going to hear a lot, time and time again, because it is scripted for them.
Stop saying it's Israel versus Hamas. It's in their playbook. The first way they manipulate you and make people lose sympathy towards us is by calling us by different names. Let me show you. You're already aware of this playbook that they have of how to speak. Let me show you something quickly. They differentiate between the Palestinians and Hamas. Why? Because the American people feel for the Palestinians. But if it sounds like you're attacking the Palestinians, even though they elected Hamas, the little side note, rather than their leadership, you will lose public support. And that's the reason you see them writing Israel versus Hamas, so you guys lose sympathy towards the people that are getting unalived.
It's November 2nd. The organization Stop Anti-Semitism recently released a tweet saying in New York City a truck was spotted driving around Manhattan. They were trying to figure out who was driving it. Now, with an organization with the name Stop Anti-Semitism, you would think that what they're criticizing on the truck was probably pretty terrible. Well, this is what was on it. That's right. Stop Anti-Semitism was upset because this truck had a screen saying Israel kills one child every 10 minutes. This is an accurate figure based on information collected from the organization Defense for Children International Palestine. What they noted that as a result of Israel's strikes post-October 7th, one child in Gaza has been killed every 10 minutes, a statistic that is genuinely horrific. So why is the organization Stop Anti-Semitism upset about that? Well, the answer is that Stop Anti-Semitism, like many organizations similar to it, is actually a Zionist organization masquerading as an organization primarily focused on anti-Semitism. What they've been doing over the past couple of years is trying to conflate anti-Zionism, a critique of the Zionist political ideology and its physical manifestation, Israel, with anti-Semitism. They do this to undermine critiques of Israel as well as the efforts of anti-Zionist organizers nationwide. But with Israel's recent actions in the Gaza Strip, this is becoming increasingly difficult to do because people can recognize that this is not anti-Semitism. This is a critique of a genocide. And that's notable because these traditional propaganda strategies that Zionists have deployed in order to undermine Palestinian solidarity efforts are failing in this current moment. Now, it's a good thing that propaganda is failing, but it is not stopping these organizations from continually attempting to pump it out. And what we can do is point it out when we see it and revel in how genuinely absurd it really is. Something worth thinking on. As always, free Palestine, and have a great day.
There's a really good reason why, when you criticize Israel, you're called an anti-Semite. A few days ago, The Nation reported Benjamin Netanyahu's media strategy in America ramped up in 2015 when he assembled a secret task force in Vegas to wage a propaganda campaign. Netanyahu leaned on a multi-billionaire Zionist named Sheldon Adelson to host at the Venetian Hotel. The Nation reports that even though it was supposed to be secret, it got leaked. During the meeting, Sheldon Adelson read a letter from Netanyahu, quote, "Delegitimization of Israel must be fought, and you are on the front lines. The Israeli government is committed to launching assertive and innovative programs and to joining you and many others around the world to combat the lies and slander that are leveled against us." Netanyahu was trying to take aim at a growing assortment of college students, human rights advocates, even influencers rallying against Israeli apartheid through boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning Israel. The BDS movement had been growing. Among its biggest supporters was Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who battled against apartheid alongside Nelson Mandela. The Nation goes on to report Netanyahu's move to counter these protesters in America was basically to buy political power. If he had support in Washington, he could create laws to make it a crime to boycott Israel. And this could be won through endless phony accusations of anti-Semitism, as well as branding nonviolent boycotters as terrorists. The group that he assembled, who met at the Venetian Hotel in Vegas, would become a task force of billionaires whose objective was to launch a political and psychological war targeting Americans. In the first night, that task force raised $50 million. Now, the problem with the meeting was that these billionaires were doing something potentially criminal, because they could be agents of a foreign power, punishable up to a decade in prison. American donors were then approached by an Israeli psychological warfare firm. It had connections to the Mossad, and it was codenamed Project Butterfly. The Nation reports that the proposal outlined a secretive operation whose purpose was to damage Americans and American organizations associated with the BDS movement. It would disrupt activities, lead to false investigations, hidden media campaigns. According to its own operation plan, Project Butterfly was aimed at, quote, executing intelligence and influence efforts against Americans by creating an infrastructure for narrative warfare. In other words, by creating fake news outlets, phony Facebook personas, and posts and other forms of information warfare, Psy Group's goal was to deliberately deceive the American public about Israel and its actions against Palestinians. They targeted individuals like students and faculty with unwarranted investigations and charges of anti-Semitism. The guy in charge of this secret operation, Gilad Erdan, is now Israel's ambassador to the UN. The Nation reports that in one talk the Psy Group gave to Israeli Americans, they said, quote, in order to win, we must use tricks and craftiness. That includes threats, intimidation, harassment, covert influence, troll farms, fear-mongering, blacklists. They even spied on Americans. What we've done is mapped and analyzed the whole boycott phenomena globally. Not just the United States, not just campuses, but labor unions and churches. We started to establish a project called Israeli Cyber Shield. This is actually a civil intelligence unit that collects, analyzes, and acts upon the activists in the BDS movement, of its people, organizations, and events. We give it everything we collect, using the most sophisticated data system, intelligence system in the Israeli market. Around the same time, Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs budgeted another $570,000 to create a computer and smartphone application that would turn tens of thousands of Americans into an internet army of Israeli trolls. The Nation goes on to say that the agents involved are granted virtual immunity from arrest by pressure on top politicians on the Hill. The pro-Israel groups like AIPAC are just too wealthy. But it's a situation that greatly frustrates many in the FBI. It means bureau personnel are constantly required to close their eyes when it comes to criminal activity by Israel. They even quote a former top FBI counterintelligence officer named I.C. Smith. They said, quote, dealing with the Israelis was, for those assigned that area, extremely frustrating. The Israelis were supremely confident that they had the clout, especially on the Hill, to basically get away with just about anything. For context, in June, the UN called out 35 US states over laws banning anti-Israel bias. Over the years, Israeli intelligence increased its secret war on innocent Americans, and likewise paid less attention to Hamas.
Y'all remember this video?
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Does that video rub you the wrong way or make you mad at all? Okay, then watch this, tell me what you think about it.
Have you noticed something?
Following breaking news out of the Middle East, Israeli defense forces say the Israeli military says Hamas.
As Israel says it targeted tunnels and weapons manufacturing sites.
Israel says
We spoke with the international spokesperson from the IDF, Richard Hecht.
Israeli authorities say
the Israelis say.
Israel says
Israel's defense forces saying.
Israel saying
That's according to the Israeli military.
Israel says
Every single time.
Now, if the first video bothers you and the second video doesn't, you really need to ask yourself if you really care about the integrity of the information that you're taking in. Or are you just looking for confirmation bias based on your own viewpoints? This should be a red flag to everybody that a foreign power has that much control over our media. And the Sinclair Group is not an unbiased source of reference. They've made their position very clear. But watch out for that propaganda on social media.